PodCast.
This is a podcast following last night's event, which was content management systems. So I think it's the 26th of March, the morning after the night before. We thought we'd put a quick podcast together to sort of summarise some of the key points from last night. I've got with me daughter, who was at the event last night, and Paul, who was attempting to film it as well. So we had about 30 there last night, businesses, which is interesting because it's certainly not a long way off our highest attendance. But for me, one of the most important subjects, it sounds a bit dry as content management systems, so it's a bit kind of techie or noodly. But to me, if you can't alter the content of your website, if you can't put new content on there regularly, how are you going to engage in Web 2 and the conversation and that the web has changed to? So I kicked off by doing a quick Google Trends search for the phrase web design, and basically that showed a decline in the popularity of that search in Google, people searching that for the last 5 years, which I take, not that the web is sort of becoming less important, quite the opposite. It's the fact that rather than people looking for web design skills, increasingly people have got systems on the website where they don't need to know HTML and web design. And those systems are content management systems. So, you simply have, for me, to have a way of altering the content without HTML if you don't want to sort of acquire those sort of more techie kind of skills. Paul?
I guess my 5 pence is just going to be to throw in that actually, however sophisticated these systems are becoming, they are becoming incredibly sophisticated, the free software, the open source that was mentioned. There really is a big support network out there to actually get this stuff up and running. So you may have seen open source and thought, oh my god, it does absolutely everything. There's no way I can integrate a system like this. Very easy step-by-step instructions. Even though the end product is very good, you can do an awful lot with it. You can probably set a lot of this stuff up yourself. You don't need to know HTML, you just need to know how to follow people's instructions. As
and you're
always,
thinking of a kind of WordPress type approach there, are you?
Even further in the sophistication than WordPress. Certainly WordPress, big community behind it, easy walkthroughs, people have put videos up there, how to do it, and it's just a step-by-step guide. So you take a day of your time, you could easily put a WordPress kind of site together. Again, it's always going to be about your needs. Does it cover your needs? But it will be one day wasted if you realise that it's beyond you. And then you can start to invest in some of these professionals to bring in. If it's one day where you actually get a really good feel for this and think, actually, yeah, I can follow these instructions, I can ask questions to people online, I can get this thing together, then maybe you can take these free products that step further and get more sophisticated systems to suit your needs.
I'm going to throw another name into that, because last night they were fantastically evasive about pricing, not wanting to get boxed into a corner. We don't need to be so careful, so I'm going to kind of price it and say, we were trying to make this case that at the bottom end there are free models. There are literally free little mini content management systems that you can integrate in that progressively increase in sort of price and sophistication. The name I'm going to throw it at is Phil Allen at Fusion XS, who is part of eChampions. The reason why I'm throwing that in is that Phil does, I won't call them cheap and cheerful websites, but he does kind of starter websites with a content management system in them, which can, I think, start from about sort of £300, that kind of money. So you can have a proper HTML website that can be SEO'd up with a nice simple content management system that hands the control over to you for day-to-day publishing and changes for about literally that kind of money. And then kind of scaling up from there, you've got OS and bespoke and open source using something like Joomla or Drupal. If you budgeted from, I would say, about sort of £3,000 onwards, would you say somewhere around that would be reasonable? And then in terms of bespoke, again, if you sort of start budgeting from similar kind of money, I think one of the points that was made, I'll make again, that was made last night, was this idea that open source is not free. We should have maybe called the event OS doesn't mean free. It's when you're working with Magento or Drupal or Joomla or things like that, there is a cost associated, not with the software, which is free, but with the specialists who you need to help you modify it for you. So in that respect, you need to budget for kind of similar amounts.
Yeah, just on that point, the hosting side of it as well, something that was mentioned last night, the hosting will cost you as you incorporate larger and larger, more sophisticated systems. So another cost that's always attached is that ongoing cost to actually keep this thing live on the web.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in terms of these big systems, they are quite kind of lardy and cumbersome in the amount of code, which doesn't affect you as the user of it, other than you need to budget properly for hosting. So 50 to 100 quid a month is a realistic hosting figure for a Magento-based e-commerce site. I think what we did, we talked about content management systems as just a way of publishing, yeah, and so at the bottom end we said WordPress or Surreal and that kind of thing. In the middle, open source, Joomla, Drupal. Perhaps towards the top end, the corporate solutions is the sort of fully bespoke route. Those are mainly just about being able to edit text and image content on a website. We then made the point that there are 3 equal parallels for e-commerce. Bottom end, you've got simple things like PayPal, and it's a great start way of getting a simple shopping cart system onto a website. Moving up into the middle, you've got Magento as the open source approach, and then towards the top end again, you've got the kind of bespoke approach that sort of Paul was talking about last night.
My thoughts are, don't go for free just because it's free. You need to actually pick something that's going to be suitable and scalable for the business. And I also think that a point is to be made that a bespoke solution can actually be excellent for companies that are slightly different, and it means you can have it done exactly to your needs, as opposed to trying to budge something into being your needs, which was sometimes be the case with open source. So I think bespoke isn't kind of to be underestimated. No matter what system you go for, and you have a really good think about what it is you're trying to do, because if you go for the cheap and cheerful 3-page free WordPress site today, in a year's time, chances are that isn't good enough anymore, and you're back where you are now, having to do a new solution if it wasn't scalable in the first place.
Don't throw into the hat your favourite free or low cost one. I keep calling it Swizzle.
Squiz.
I can never remember that one. Squiz, yeah. So some things to kind of, if you want to have a look at bottom end stuff and Google around the buzzwords for this podcast, I suppose. At the bottom end, cheap and cheerful, have a look at WordPress, Squiz.
Yeah.
Got it right finally. And Surreal, if you're a Surreal CMS, Google around those. If you're going into the more serious systems, have a look at Magento, which is an OS e-commerce system. Have a look at Joomla and Drupal. And towards that top end, you need to be Google around bespoke CMS, bespoke e-commerce, and words like PHP, MySQL, ASP, that kind of stuff. Anything else from you guys?
Just one last comment. If this whole kind of subject is scaring the life out of you, the idea of going down the route of content management systems, at the end of the day, whether you do it yourself or a professional does it, you need to be the one that's going into this back-end system, to be changing the content, to be adapting this stuff. If that entire area scares you, just go and join a forum somewhere, have a bit of a play in a forum and submit a few posts here and there. It's the same kind of system, the same kind of functionality that you've got. If you're okay with submitting in forums, then maybe try and put yourself a basic blog together, play around in WordPress. That kind of simple end to it will give you a feel for what you're going to have to deal with if you've got a content management system. And if you're happy with submitting information on those, or even in just things like social media, Facebook, if you're happy with submitting information in there, you can run a content management system quite easily.
Content management systems, we've said that there, it's really important that you've got that skill. I still think that as a business you need also, if you can do it, HTML skills as well, because you do need that kind of classic web designer ability to be able to search engine optimize the website. So perhaps with a bit of a gratuitous sell, you could be looking at doing web design with us here at Axis Centre, some of the web design courses which focus on Dreamweaver and HTML, and perhaps doing that in conjunction with also installing a CMS where you're giving perhaps some of your colleagues within the business the ability to change things via the CMS. You also use that, but perhaps you've got an overarching view of how web design works properly in the background as well. If you didn't make this event and you do want to come, we're delivering it down at Leicester on this coming Tuesday. If not, we'll see you at the next event in either Nottingham or Leicester, which, as I said, was this big catch-up.
This is an eChampions production on behalf of Axis Centre.